So anyone who's just joining, we're just introducing ourselves in the chat by giving your name, your organization, and your first ever paid job. So we have hardware store, cleaning a TV repair shop on Sundays. It's good memory. Delivering newspapers, great. Other than babysitting, working in a restaurant, bussing tables. Working at a theater camp. Babysitting, another babysitting. So it's like 3 of us started as babysitters. Working on a farm, feeding and exercising, taking care of horses. That sounds like a dream job for a lot of teenagers I know. First job's at Dairy Twirl. Amy, I've known you for so long and I don't think I knew that. That is great. And your video looks great too. All right, we will welcome people as they arrive. Oh, another babysitter. Okay. Oh, Parks and Recreation Department and mowing lawns, trash removal, etc. for Parks and Recreation. Okay, so these are some great first jobs. We'll be talking a little bit today about high school students and their first jobs. So it's nice to think back to what our first jobs were. So Brie, if you want to start us off, I think it looks like we're ready.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Brianna Marceau, and I'm Vice President of Operations and Programs at the Greater Concord Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank you all for joining us today. Our mission as an organization is to develop economic opportunities, strengthen the business climate, and enhance the quality of life here in the Capital Region. And a big part of that is investing in our youth. We know that strong economies hinge upon youth having the skills they need to secure meaningful and well-paid work. We're excited to explore the role that workplace partners can play in developing these meaningful career pathways for students. I'm pleased to introduce you to our presenters today. We have Kathi Terami from CLiC and Amy Tietjen Smith from the Concord Regional Technical Center. A little bit about Kathi. As a first-generation college student, Kathi often reflects back on her teen years and is grateful for the many adults who inspired her and offered support along her career path. Now, as the Executive Director of CLiC, Kathi is part of a team that has connected resources from over 1,500 employers to 25,000 students and 800 educators in 350 schools in New Hampshire and Vermont during the past 21 years. All this is to help the next generation prepare for life after high school. And Amy works as a work-based learning specialist at the CRTC, Concord Regional Technical Center. She's been there since the 2019-2020 school year. And Amy works with teachers, students, and industry partners to implement and continuously improve work-based learning models. Amy is a global career development facilitator and a certified career services provider with over 20 years experience coordinating career exploration programs for youth, and is passionate about finding opportunities for youth to explore future options and practice new skills. Thank you, Kathi and Amy, both for being here today. And thank you to CLiC and the Concord Regional Technical Center for partnering with us on this event. So let's begin.
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to be here. Brie gave an excellent introduction, so I don't think I need to add anything to that. You know all about me now.
Okay, great. And same here, Brie, thank you for that great introduction. I just wanted to mention a couple of things as Amy and I have been working on today's session. We are very open to hearing your questions and your input and feedback. So definitely use the chat throughout this session to ask questions, share feedback with each other, with us. And some of that we may be able to field during the session. We might be able to answer your questions right there. We'll see if we have a little time at the end to answer questions, and any questions that we can't get to today, if you put those in the chat, we can try to follow up with you after. And just a reminder that this session is being recorded so it can be shared with others who were interested but couldn't make it today or might come across it later. So you'll be hearing us read aloud some of the things that might appear in the chat, since the chat is not captured in the recording. So thank you all for sharing your introductions at the beginning and sharing what your first paid job was. It was great to see that. Okay, to warm us up, we're going to start with a pop-up poll. One of the topics that we're going to cover this morning is SB 276, the Drive to 65 Act. And we want to find out if you've heard of this, what your familiarity is with it. Any answer is okay, but Trieste, if you want to pop up that poll for us, we'll give everyone a little bit of time to answer. So you should be seeing a poll on your screen. If you're not, don't worry, you can type your answer in the chat. But if you do see that poll there, go ahead and pick one option. I have never heard of SB 276. I've heard of it, but I'm unsure how it relates to my work, or I'm familiar with SB 276. Okay, so it says here that 75% of you have never heard of SB 276. I think that's what we were anticipating, so that's good. And 25% of you, the rest of you, have heard of SB 276 but are unsure how it relates to your work. And none of you are familiar with SB 276. So Amy,
Well,
this
great.
is extra
So
valuable.
I'll be sharing some info that is new to all of you. So this is a Senate bill that establishes a plan and a pathway for the state of New Hampshire to address workforce needs. And it was developed based on some of the findings in the study cited here, the 65 by 25 Achieving Economic Prosperity Through Post-Secondary Education study. And we do have a link to that white paper that we can put in the chat for anybody who wants to dig deep into it. But the language 65 by 25 or Drive to 65 Act comes from the goal that 65% of New Hampshire adults, so those aged 25 and older, will have some form of post-secondary education. So that's from certificates to advanced degrees by 2025. And the idea that this is moving us towards targets from national research position New Hampshire to support a strong future economy. So there are a couple of key things in here. You'll note that it talks about by 2025, we want 65% of adults 25 and older. So when this was passed a couple of years ago, the 2025 target date was 6 or 7 years away. So we were talking about 18-year-olds at that point moving into the workforce. So that's why there's a significant portion of this act geared towards high school youth, because they are the up and coming 25 and older group. And when they talk about some form of post-secondary education, they are talking much broader than just your traditional 2- and 4-year degrees. They're talking any kind of industry recognized certificate that shows employability skills. It could be apprenticeships, it could be licenses. So there's a great deal of flexibility in what that looks like. So let's talk about what this means specifically for schools, because that's the frame of reference that Kathi and I are coming from and that we are talking to you today from. The Act specifically requires schools to start with freshmen and assess their interests. Every incoming freshman has to have a basic interest assessment and then get advisement on how to achieve a career-ready credential, a pathway to that interest. We in schools are required to communicate with students what the pathways are. What are the local pathways to career credentials? And to continue working with them, advising them, communicating with them, helping them develop their own personal pathway. Schools are required to report to the New Hampshire Department of Education how many of our students complete CTE, Career and Technical Education, how many of our students do dual and concurrent enrollment, so that those are both college credit bearing classes, and the difference between dual and concurrent just has to do with whether they're taking it at the high school or actually enrolling at the college. ELO enrollments, work-based learning enrollments, and any credentials awarded. So we're also going to put a link in the chat to a more detailed technical assistance document and all the language of Drive to 65. But for our purposes today, we're focusing on the requirements of schools, and in particular, CTE completers, ELO enrollments, and work-based learning enrollments. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about those. First of all, CTE stands for Career and Technical Education. So I represent the Concord Regional Technical Center here, and we are one of 28 career centers throughout the state of New Hampshire. In New Hampshire, we have over 9,300 students enrolled. There are 75 unique career pathways offered, and throughout the state, we partner with over 1,000 industry partners. So our CTE is funded by federal dollars, and a requirement for us, a federal requirement, separate from the SB 276 state requirement, a federal requirement for CTE is that every CTE student must participate in work-based learning. Here in the Concord Tech Center, you can see the 11 programs that we offer, the schools that we serve. So we serve a wide swath, and the towns and cities represented. So I'm addressing the Concord Regional Chamber, and you can look at this and see that we're more than just Concord High School. Concord Regional Technical Center is physically connected to Concord High School, and we're under the auspices of the Concord School District, but we have multiple sending schools and we serve multiple towns. So the next one in that SB 276 reporting requirement list was ELOs. So what is an ELO? ELO stands for Extended Learning Opportunity. And these are offered at comprehensive high schools throughout the state. Most schools have a designated ELO coordinator, or if somebody doesn't have that specific title, they have a staff person who is tasked with overseeing ELOs, and the coordinators or the overseers will manage all the agreements with partners, approval of sites, communication with all parties. That's their role. Throughout the state, we have a network of all of these professionals who are doing this work. It's called the New Hampshire ELO Network. And we're going to put that link in the chat. And all of these links that we're putting in the chat, we will also make available in a list later so you can go back and find them. But the ELO network is a place where you can find who is the key point person at a particular school. So if there's a certain high school that you want to connect with or a certain middle school, you can go to that website and find out who's the point person. Work-based learning. So another one, and we use alphabet soup a lot in education, as you can see, ELO, CTE, WBL. WBL stands for work-based learning. And these are opportunities that enhance learning that occurs in the classroom. They are specifically career-focused and enable students to showcase skills that they have mastered, but also practice professional skills in real settings, and are heavily supported by workplace mentors in addition to school staff. So when I talk about ELO, extended learning opportunities, and I talk about work-based learning for our career and technical education students, what is the difference? So ELOs can include work-based learning. Work-based learning is almost always an ELO. Anything that's a work-based learning experience is an extended learning experience. It's experience taking place outside of the classroom. So ELOs can include varying levels of work-based learning, tours, job shadows, increasingly intensive experiences and internship. ELOs can also be a deep dive into an academic subject that might be a project-based experience, a research project, a service learning experience, and all of those will have a community mentor, but not necessarily be a work-based learning placement. And ELOs they can earn core academic credit, so you can set up an ELO that meets math requirements, or they can be elective credit. My students, my career and technical education students, as I mentioned earlier, are required to participate in work-based learning. And for our federal requirement, that is defined as a sustained interaction with a professional in a real workplace setting to foster in-depth firsthand engagement with the tasks required in a given career field. So for us at CRTC, we have 700 students. 250 of them are year 2 students, so it's a 2-year program. And by the time all of our year 2 students complete, they need to have at least 10 hours in an authentic workplace in a work-based learning setting. So ELO's work-based learning is optional. In career and technical education, it is a completer requirement.
Okay, thanks, Amy, for that overview. I think just hearing you describe all of these different opportunities and ways that employers can engage with schools is really important to have a snapshot of what the requirements of schools are, because we know, and we talked a lot with Brie in the chamber about what employer needs are and employer interests are, and when schools can understand what the employer needs are and employers can understand what the school needs are and requirements are, that's when I think really good things can happen. That's where the synergy is. So it's good to understand both sides. I'm going to shift gears just a little bit and talk about skills and opportunities for engagement. So to start us off, I want to ask everyone to share in the chat. What is a skill that you learned from your first job that you still use today? A lot of you told us about your first job at the beginning. We saw babysitting, paper delivery, working at the dairy twirl, all sorts of things there, working for Parks and Rec, restaurant, table bussing. So think back to those first jobs of a skill you learned then that you're still using in your work today. So if you have a chance, share that with us in the chat. I'll come up with one too. Okay, so great. So we have teamwork. So teamwork at the dairy twirl, Amy. I'm not going to be able to match everyone up, but I remember yours. So that's great. Customer service. Great, Benjamin. Brie, you have patience. Oh, that's good. Time management. Excellent. Communication. I put in the ability to work with a variety of people. That's from babysitting. There are no two kids alike, and same with parents. Being efficient, Sean, thanks. Trieste, time management again. So we're hearing that one a couple of times. Staying calm in challenges, Emily. That's a great one. So thinking about skills from your first jobs, when we're working with youth and placing them in workplaces for job shadowing, internships, co-ops, maybe just regular paid employment, helping them with getting their first job, it's really important to point out to youth that these skills you're getting in these first jobs are going to stay with you a long time. And this is evidence of that. So just by sharing and thinking back to those skills, and it also is why it's so important for employers to give those first opportunities to very green youth who don't have a lot of experience and might be uncertain what lies ahead on their career path. There's still a lot of skill building that's happening even amid that greenness and uncertainty. So thanks for sharing. Okay, so getting specific about skills in New Hampshire, we hear a lot about skills. What skills are required in the workplace? And nationally, there's the 4 C's. I'm not sure if you've heard those before, but that's communication, creativity, collaboration, and critical thinking. And in New Hampshire, they have college and career ready standards. Amy, if you want to share that link in the chat, if anyone's interested in seeing what schools need from the Department of Education in terms of college and career ready standards, you can explore that a little there. But basically, there's 3 categories: knowledge, skills, and New Hampshire work study practices. There's a lot of information that you can find on the DOE website that explores all of those. But for the work study practices, there we have communication, creativity, collaboration, that's 3 of the 4 C's, and self-direction, a little bit different. Interestingly, in Vermont, they have 5, and one of them is self-direction. So both New Hampshire and Vermont added self-direction to that list, which is really interesting to me that both states think that students taking initiative is really important and a skill that they should graduate with. Now, how do students get these skills? There are all different ways. CLiC leads a lot of workshops for students on skills building. We call it showcasing essential skills. And we talk to students about what skills are in demand in the workplace and in life. We talk a little bit about good citizenship and volunteerism and other things like that, and how they can identify what skills they already have and how they can build new skills. And we also talk about articulating those skills. How can you tell a prospective employer what your skills are? How can you demonstrate that? So that's a workshop that we lead for students. And I know that tech centers and high schools are having some of those same conversations with students as well. But how students can build those skills really varies. There's a lot, we talk to students about how many skills they're building just in their academic classes in school. So we give a lot of examples of those, but giving them a chance to practice in a workplace, to gain these skills, practice them, get good at them, start to master some of them, give students just a huge head start on what life after high school looks like for them. So that's where employers come in. Schools can do a lot, homes, parents can do a lot, communities can do a lot through volunteer opportunities, but really workplaces for getting some of those career ready skills, that's where it's happening. So employers play a big role in that early skill development of youth. Okay, so Brie asked us to talk about ways that employers can get involved. So I'm going to ask you again to share with us in the chat, just thinking about when you became an adult, maybe more established in your career or starting a new career, might be after post-secondary education, or just even now. What is something you wished you had learned earlier? So you told us a little bit about what skills you learned in your first job that you still use today, but what's something you gained as an adult, but it might have been helpful to know it a little earlier? That's a good mindset to think about what you can impart on youth if you're working with them today. So let's see, this one's a little harder, but I'm guessing some of you have examples of something like that. I'll put one in here for me. More technical skills. Thanks, Joe, for sharing. I'm going to put conflict resolution in there. That for me was one. Trieste. That is great. Good timing. And oh my gosh, Laurel. Okay, so 3 of us, 3 votes for conflict resolution. I found it took my first few jobs that I did after babysitting, I had real issues with not knowing how to resolve conflict, and we encounter it all the time. So that's fantastic, Laurel and Trieste, that you thought the same thing. And Emily's agreeing, here, here. So boy, Amy, maybe this is something we need to think about adding. We don't even talk about conflict resolution much in our student workshops. So this could be a good thing to talk about. We do talk a little bit in internships. What happens if you encounter a problem at your internship? How can you communicate that to your workplace mentor, your supervisor, maybe your co-op or internship coordinator? Sean, okay, so you've shared wisdom, understanding people. That's a good one. I also feel like it probably takes time and maybe a little bit of age to get there. But I know some pretty wise youth that have had some good experiences that have helped them out. Okay, and feel free to keep sharing in the chat when we flip to the next slide. That doesn't mean this is over if you have something else you want to share, because it's really helpful for us to hear from you, because then that can affect the work that we're doing with youth. Okay, so I'm going to just take a moment to tell you a little bit about, you heard Brie say at the beginning, kind of the scope and scale of Careers CLiC's work that we work with students in grades K through 12. A lot of employers think, you know, high school is where it's at, or maybe even post-secondary college. But really, it's like with a lot of things, the earlier that students start to think about careers, the better, because that builds a foundation for later, more intense work that they'll be doing. So we actually start right in kindergarten with guest speakers in the classroom. You might remember back to early elementary school doing dress up, maybe picking a career that you might be interested in to dress up as for Halloween, things like that, starting to think about that. So career awareness at the elementary level is really important. And one example we love to share is that kindergartners, when we have guest speakers go into the classroom, often learn for the first time that their teacher is working. The perspective of a 5-year-old is, they're just experiencing life around them. And until they understand why things are the way they are, why are their parents working? And wow, my teacher's working. You mean they don't live here? We've heard 5-year-olds say that, or they don't have to be here. They're choosing. This was a career that they chose and trained for and are doing. So then at the middle school level, that's where a lot of the exploration work begins. That's where I often think that's a sweet spot for employers who are willing to work with students in middle school by welcoming them into their workplaces for an industry tour or maybe a half-day job shadow, where students are just starting to think about their career paths. They're probably not on a career path yet, except for a handful of students that already know what they want to do, but they're starting to think about what classes are they going to register for in their junior or their freshman year of high school. And they may not know how to make those choices if they haven't started exploring some careers. So we don't really talk about career defining moments in middle school as much as exploring as much as possible. And employers are really essential in providing opportunities, guest speakers in the classroom, panelists on career panels or career events, and hosting students on job shadows. And then in high school, that's where the more intensive, longer term opportunities come up. There's also small opportunities like having a booth at a career fair or coming to speak just once to a classroom. Those things are still happening throughout that whole continuum. But in high school, that's where it's really important for as many employers as possible to open their doors to maybe a semester-long internship or a co-op with a tech center. And the role shifts a little there, where mentorship becomes really important over a longer period of time. Having someone identified in a workplace who can kind of mentor and guide and coach a student who's very green in that field and help them with that skills building and identification and articulation of those skills that we talked about earlier. So that's the whole range from elementary to middle school, and also intensity of ways to get involved. Amy, if you have a chance and can pop in our website link in the chat, you can go and click on each of these and find different opportunities for participation. Okay, so I wanted to ask attendees here today if you have examples to share with us and each other of ways you've gotten involved with schools. It could be any of the things that Amy mentioned, or any of the things that I mentioned, or maybe something that hasn't been mentioned at all. We certainly haven't covered every possibility. So if anyone wants to share in the chat any way you've been involved with a school, it could even be thinking about things like employer representation on different committees or curriculum development. We've seen that happen before, especially at the tech center level. Amy, I don't know what your tech center has, but I know some of the tech centers we work with actually have like employer based advisory boards for certain areas.
Yes, that is a tech center requirement, actually. There's an advisory board for the tech center at large, and each individual program has an advisory board made up of industry partners.
Okay, so there's an opportunity that might not be that well known outside of working in the CTE field. So there's opportunities to actually shape that training and education through advisory boards like that. Okay, Sean has shared that job shadowing with students at the bank, so that's great. Sean, I don't know if you can pop in there if you've done that with middle school or high school students, what grade level or age. That would be helpful to see. I know we do a lot of job shadowing at the middle school level, but you're okay, you're saying high school. So that is definitely a great opportunity to get involved. Joe is saying support public schools across New Hampshire with college access, expanding services to focus more on career and aptitude exploration, focusing on middle and high school ages. Okay, fantastic. I love hearing about college access being combined with career exploration. That seems like an obvious connection, but it doesn't always happen for every youth in every school setting. ELO coordinators, work-based learning coordinators, co-op coordinators, all of those educators are really excellent at doing that, but not every student necessarily interacts with one of those people. And glad to hear both at middle school and high school level. Okay, so while Amy has a couple of specific student examples that she can share with us, but while she's doing that, if you think of other examples of ways you've gotten involved with schools, or maybe other things you've heard of other people doing, or even an idea that you haven't really seen anyone doing, but you think it could be a good way to get involved, please share that with us. We'll collect all that, and that will be really helpful to us. But we'll let Amy share a couple of examples while you're thinking of those things.
Sure. So at the very beginning of the webinar, we flashed the sort of the goal for today, which was to have you all have an opportunity to explore the role that workplace partners can play in developing meaningful pathways for students. And I know many workplaces are coming at this from a position of, we have an employment hiring need huge in the community right now, and how can we solve this? We will partner with you and talk to you about that immediate need, but we are also going to continue to tell you that this is a long game, and anywhere you engage along the continuum that Kathi was showing you will affect your future workforce. And the most impactful way to engage with schools with workforce development in mind is to have a strategic plan of how you are going to engage at every grade level, and to think about that from a corporate planning standpoint. So these two examples that I'm showing you are the end of the continuum, the career engagement, the actual practicing of it. These are our year 2 students who are wrapping up their high school experience. They're out there, they're engaging in an authentic workplace. They have had those touches all along the way. They did elementary exploration, they did tours, they did job shadows, they chose a program at a career and technical education to focus on, or center to focus on, and this is where they ended up. So this student, Tristan, was one of our computer engineering students, and did an internship. It's a poor kid. It started like 3 weeks before COVID hit us. So he got 3 weeks into the internship and then shifted to remote mentorship, and wasn't able to fully experience it. But nevertheless, he worked alongside IT staff, and he was really sort of a help desk assistant. And he, for those few weeks that he was there, felt it was really valuable. He learned both technical and workplace skills, and believes that they really impacted his future. So he went on to Worcester Polytechnic. He's studying cybersecurity. Another example, this is a student in our education and behavioral sciences class. So these are students who are possibly interested in becoming teachers, but also interested in mental health and behavioral health. And this student in particular had an interest in cognitive behavioral therapy. So she built an ELO that included some external courses in the areas that she was interested in. She was working as an ambassador for an organization called No Intel, where she was able to create some resources for peers. And she did have a community mentor, an expert in the field, who helped her through that experience and helped her develop the materials that she was then able to present as her final project. And she's now studying at NHTI. So those are just 2 of dozens of examples that we have here at CRTC of the direction some of these connections can take. They're very personalized, and that's why there are key staff people at the school to work with businesses to find the right fit in terms of student, business, opportunity, the growth, all of those things. So we're very interested in working with you on that.
Amy, would you
Yeah.
be able to share at all like the specific employer entry points, like especially for Tristan's example maybe, but it also could be just in general with the CTE Center, like how how did Tristan work alongside IT staff at Rhymes? Like, who made that connection? Is that based on student interest? Is it based on your role, both?
It happens so many different ways. I mean, it can be a student comes to me and says, hey, I'm interested in doing this. And I literally start Googling local companies that, oh, is there a company that has a graphic designer that specializes in branding and marketing? And I start looking around and Googling that and and I just make cold calls to people saying, hey, I have a student. That's one way. I mentioned that we have an advisory board. So our advisory board is our resource bank. So often we'll go to them and say, here's what we're trying to do. And then we have partners that we have worked with year over year that have built a sustained relationship with us. So an example would be our automotive program. All of our seniors in that program spend 10 weeks in an internship at a local auto dealer. And we have 6 or 7 of them that for years just know Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday from 9 to 11, I'm going to have an auto student here working with me. And then many of them get hired for after school jobs as technicians, and then go on to pursue that as a field where the employer supports their education at a local community college alongside continued employment and job growth. So those are just some examples of the ways we do that.
And I have another question. Based on your experiences at the CTE Center and maybe with sending schools right in your region, but also you have a role on the statewide ELO network as well. What would you say are like some of the pressing needs or even things on a wish list for like an ELO coordinator or a work-based learning specialist for employer engagement?
Right. So an ELO coordinator will work very similar to the way I do. A student will come to them, and this would be at a comprehensive high school, the designated person to help coordinate these experiences for students. A student would come to them saying, I have an interest in something, and the ELO coordinator would start working their network and talking about who could mentor that student. Here at Concord High, I happen to share an office with the ELO coordinator for Concord High School. And one of the things that they're starting to create here are what they're calling Ready Set ELOs, which is basically just an ELO that already has all of the parameters in place. And the student just sort of, it's kind of like a job description. The student walks in and says, oh, I like this ELO about veterinary science. I'm going to take an Ed2Go class. It's going to take 6 weeks and cost $130. And I'm going to do 3 days job shadowing at a veterinary clinic that Concord High already has a partnership with. So that's a Ready Set ELO. It's packaged, it's ready to go. The student, after doing the required number of hours, would get a 0.5 elective credit for that. So that's one example of the way the ELO coordinators are partnering.
Wow. So a student could walk in and pick an opportunity, but sometimes students come with their own interests and might have something.
And then they design their own. Yep.
Okay.
So I think probably what you're hearing from us here is that the ways of partnering are as unique as the number of students we have. Every student, our goal in schools these days is to create personalized experiences for students. And that is definitely a staff intensive way to go and hugely dependent on community partnership.
Okay, great. Thanks for answering my questions. Now, I did check in with Trieste and Brie, if it's okay with you, we have just enough time if people wanted to ask questions or share about the content that you've just heard right now, ask questions of either me or Amy or of each other. If we wanted to have a conversation, you do have the ability to unmute your mic, you can raise your hand, or you could pop something into the chat. We have a few minutes where we could have a conversation around this if you'd like to. And then I know before we close, Brie wants to talk a little bit about next steps and what's next. So I would invite you to raise your hand or unmute your mic or put something. You can also send questions via the chat. Brie is writing there, and we can go ahead and have a conversation around some of the things that we just heard now. And Brie, you're welcome to walk us through this. And Brie, too, this is your first time. We talked a lot in our planning meetings about this. So I don't know if you, even from a chamber perspective, on behalf of your members, have any questions for me or Amy. We'd love to hear that as well.
Sure. As we have some questions coming in, I just wanted to comment. I particularly appreciated you sharing these real life examples on those last couple of slides of how work-based learning and extended learning opportunities have impacted pathways for students in our area. I guess probably a question that would come to mind for a lot of our members is, where do I get started? How can I begin in this process? Amy's not calling me, so how do I, maybe she doesn't know me yet or hasn't found me. How do I get in touch, not just with the CRTC, but maybe with another local school that might be in their town of business?
Do you want me to address that?
That'd be great, Amy, if you
Okay.
could.
So I just put my email in the chat, and that is specifically for CRTC or Concord High. And I know we popped a lot of links in the chat as we went along, and we will create a summary of all of those and make sure to share them. But one of them was the ELO network. And on the ELO network website is a link. I think it's pretty clear. It's like in one of the top menus of to ELO coordinators, and you can find the contact person if there's a specific high school you want to connect with. And even if you're not interested in connecting with Concord, but want to know where else in the region to connect to, I'm on the leadership team for the New Hampshire ELO network, and we divide ourselves up by region, and I am the Capital Region Chair. So I can help you connect with anybody in the Capital Region if you can't find what you're looking for on the website. So my email is in the chat. And I'm constant, I'm on the phone all day, I'm emailing all day. If you haven't heard from me yet about possible work-based learning placements, by registering for this, I now have your name and I might reach out to you. Oh, and in terms of next steps, we want to go deeper in our next session. And I don't know if you want to tell everybody a little bit about that, Brianna. That's really what the January session is going to be about, is how do you take this information and make your own strategic plan, design your own work-based learning experiences.
Yeah, so I see a few questions coming in. Do we want to answer those?
Let's address
before?
those.
Yeah.
Let me scroll backwards here.
So this is from Chad Johnson at NHTI. With your two student examples, they both went on to continue their education. My question is, do you have partnerships with those institutions, or is there possible future potential to create a partnership or pipeline with a higher education institute?
So we do have partnerships especially with local community colleges, because many of the students who are in our programs are dual or concurrently enrolled in one or two college classes while they are pursuing their work-based learning experience and while they are completing their high school degree or their career and technical education certificate. And the educational pathway, similar to the employment pathway, again, is as unique as the individual students. And so we create a plan for them where they think about what their next steps could be related to the experiences they're having. And we encourage them to have conversations with their workplace mentors about what is expected in this field and how could I continue, and does the workplace offer any assistance with tuition and those kinds of things as well. So customized. That's what we're doing.
Amy, there's another one from Joe here too that I don't know if that would be a better one for you to just address or share what he's saying there. It looks like an offer.
I'm trying to find it.
Participate. It's just up above. Yes. Okay. So yeah, Joe, let's have a conversation offline about, I think you and I have met at a chamber event before and introduced ourselves, but let's continue the conversation. And I'd be happy to talk to you about what kind of partnerships we can expand.
I'm just, maybe this is a question for our attendees, if anyone would like to share. But as when we did that poll in the beginning, many of us mentioned that we didn't know much about the Drive to 65 Act. So I'm just curious, after learning more about it today, do you have a better understanding of that? Is there anything going through your mind and how that might impact you in the industry that you work in? So if you have anything to share with that, just put that in the chat. And then something else I'd be interested to learn is, what are your takeaways from today? Is there anything that really stood out to you that you'd like to do going forward after this webinar?
Brie, while people are adding any of those responses to the chat, I just want to mention that CLiC works in both New Hampshire and Vermont. We have for a couple of decades. Each state has its own legislation around this. In Vermont, it's Act 77, the Flexible Pathways Act. In New Hampshire, it's SB 276, which is much more recent. The Drive to 65 Act, both have very similar goals, but they both often are, a lot of the elements are directed by the departments of education, even though they have big impacts with employers and a lot of opportunities for employers to help make those legislative goals successful. So I think it's really good to realize that even maybe if you don't need to interact and report to the agency or Department of Education on this legislation, that schools are, and they really need employers to work with them in order to do that. And the good thing is that helps employers with their future workforce. So it's really a win-win.
Great. So I'll speak a little bit to our next event here. So as Amy had mentioned earlier, we have set a date in the new year, Tuesday, January 11th. We're going to come back again at 10 a.m. and do another web-based event. And really what we're looking to do at that event is drill more into detail on how specific organizations and businesses can design those meaningful work-based learning opportunities at your place of business. So, if you're leaving here today and, looking at that continuum, you think, wow, maybe I've done job shadowing with high schoolers, but I'd love to learn more about how my business could connect with middle schoolers. What does that look like? Who do I need to reach out to? So that's what this next event will allow attendees to do, is kind of personalize and customize some steps that they can take to move forward in this workspace. So I think we've come to the end of our questions. Kathi and Amy, is there anything else you'd like to share before we adjourn for the day?
I'm hoping to send a Google form follow-up to participants to get a sense of what would be most helpful for us to address in January. So just be on the lookout for that.
And thanks, Brie and the Chamber for hosting, and Trieste for handing the technology for this. I really appreciate it, and Amy for extending the invitation to Careers CLiC. It's a great opportunity to connect with employers and other organizations around this important work, so I appreciate that.
And thank you to all who joined us today. If you are sitting there thinking, oh, I wish my colleague had been able to watch this as well, we will be putting up a recording of this webinar in the next few days. So keep an eye out for that. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you.